Good night, everybody. Welcome to Conversation with Rickford Burke. Didn't realize my mic was muted. Share the link. Get into all your guidance groups. Share the link. Get into all of your, get onto all of your social media platforms. Share the link. We have a very important topic tonight. The rest of Member of Parliament, SHEROT, DUNCAN, and I think SHEROT might be joining us tonight. So share the link with everybody you know on your contact list. Share it via email, via WhatsApp, via IG, via Twitter, via Facebook, via Messenger, whatever, via YouTube. Whatever platform you have, share the link. We have some very interesting guests with us tonight. Christopher Jones, the Chief Member of Parliament for the APNU AFC Coalition and Chief Whip. We have veteran broadcaster and editor of Capital News, Enrico Woolford. We have Caribbean broadcaster, television broadcaster, Kenneth Gladstone, and attorney at law, Darren Wade, and possibly Mark Benchcop and SHEROT DUNCAN. Share the link, regardless of whichever platform you're on. Share the link. I'll be back in 60 seconds. right, let's get going. So earlier today, Sherrod Duncan was arrested, opposition member of parliament. And as you know, he's a member of parliament for the APNU AFC coalition. Now, after word broke of his arrest, the Guyana Police Force issued a statement, which I'll read. Offense, cybercrime. Facts. Opposition member of parliament Sherrod Duncan was arrested earlier today, Thursday, January 13, 2022, at around 11 o'clock to assist in an ongoing investigation in relation to a cybercrime offense. On the 12th of January, at about 11:30 hours, Arnell Giddings, age 36 years, IT manager of GCOM, and residing at 731 Section A, Block X, Diamond East Bank, Demerara, reported to the Guyana Police Force that on January 11, at around 8 o'clock p.m., Sherrod Duncan, a member of parliament and host of a program under the name In the Ring on Facebook, made derogatory statements in which he called my name and referred to me as a jagabat. This is the Guyana Police Force statement. Referred to me as a jagabat, trench crapple, among other disrespectful names, which caused me significant emotional stress and humiliation. As such, the mentioned video was identified and downloaded from Facebook under the name Sherrod Avery Duncan by Inspector Blair. A statement was taken from Arnell Giddings and an investigation has commenced. Trench crapple and jagabat. Those names are now crimes in Guyana. Trench crapple, jagabat. A member of parliament, a member of the social media fraternity, was arrested today because the PPP government believe calling somebody a jagabat and a trench crapple is a crime under the Cybercrime Act. Now, we're going to dissect this issue tonight. And like I said, joining us later on would be editor of Capital News, Enrico Woolford, attorney at law, Darren Wade, Mark Benchcott, Sherrod Duncan, Christopher Jones. We also expect probably Ganesh Mai Paul, member of parliament, will also join us, and veteran Caribbean broadcaster Kenny Gladstone would join us as well. So listen, were this not a serious issue in terms of a member of parliament getting arrested, it would have sounded like a joke. Keep sharing the link, everybody. Share the link. I see a number of you here already. Share this link to everyone. And text me, let me know where you're watching from. So you had a member of parliament being arrested today, host of a social media program, In the Ring, because he called, according to the Guyana Police Force, the IT manager at GCOM a trench crapple and a jagabat. A jagabat and a trench crapple. Sherrod Duncan is arrested. Is Guyana Police State? Let's find out. Joining me now is Enrico Woolford, the editor-in-chief of Capital News and former general manager of NCM. Mr. Woolford, good night to you, sir. Welcome to Conversation. Enrico, your microphone is muted. Still muted. Also joining us is attorney at law Darren Wade.
Pleasant good evening.
Welcome to the
I can't hear
conversation.
anything that is going on. Pleasant good evening to you and my brother Enrico and the entire the Guyanese listening population. But for something I cannot hear the program. No, I'm not hearing anything at all.
Oh, you're not hearing me? So let me get our technical guys on that. Let me see. Enrico. But Darren, I'm hearing you. Can you hear me? Darren, can you hear me? Can't hear me. Enrico's microphone is muted. It's telling me that. Enrico, can you hear me now? Wow. Darren, are you hearing me? Guys, can you guys text me, the viewers, can you text me, let me know if you're hearing me, anybody loud and clear? So I'm hearing somebody typing now. Enrico, is that you? Darren, is that you? Darren, can you hear me? Okay, so the audience is saying they're hearing me loud and clear. Let me see how we can resolve that. Loud and clear? Everybody hearing me loud and clear? Okay, so not sure. So we have some technical guys behind the scene working to see if we could resolve this. Could you guys log in and log out back? Let's see if that's if you guys are hearing me, could you log in and log out back? All right, so we have some technical difficulties there. Let's see how we can resolve that. All right, yeah, so as I'm waiting for Mr. Woolford and Mr. Wade to so let me see, Mr. Wade is here.
Good evening.
Darren.
Good evening. Good evening. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you loud and clear, sir.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Good evening, my brother. How are you?
Pretty good. I think that trench crap got into your phone or your computer.
Yes, yes.
Good, loud and clear. Thank you. In the meantime, while we await the others, I saw Christopher Jones just now. He came off back. So while we wait, guys, keep sharing the link. Keep sharing this link. Everybody get on to your platforms, get into your WhatsApp groups, your messenger groups, whatever social media you have. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. I'm getting your messages. Yes. Darren, somebody want to know if a Jagabat is interfering in your computer. Yes, we're gonna. Now we have a patch for the Jagabats if they tamper with our computers. So have no fear. I got the message loud and clear. Text me. Let me know where you guys are watching from. I see my friend from Germany, the U.S. military. Happy New Year, sir. Happy New Year. Keep sharing the link. Everybody share this link. So Darren, Happy New Year to you.
Oh, it's the first time we're talking for the year, no?
First time we're talking for the year.
On here.
On air, yes. On air.
Pleasant New Year to you.
Thank you.
And once again, thank you for the work that you're doing currently in advocating for basic human rights in Guyana and putting our plight out there. I really appreciate the work you have been doing. And we need to continue to pray for persons like you and SHEROT. Matter of fact, last night after the program, I posted on my Facebook page, we need to pray for SHEROT DUNCAN. Because last night was an insightful program, you know. So I figure that it would have touched some person's nerve and they would want to come after him today. So, you know, you know these people, so you could preempt them. You know,
right.
The PPP has always been a vindictive and wicked party. And when most persons come on, when other persons come on, I want to raise this point. In 1964, the PS for the premier, I think his name was Abraham.
Right.
Back then, a white or Portuguese family.
Portuguese.
Chelly Jagan.
Let me pause to welcome Mr. Christopher Jones, opposition member of Parliament and Chief Whip. Mr. Jones, thank you very much for joining us.
Most welcome. Most welcome. Good night. Good night, Darren.
Neighbor. Man with good legs, man. Good night, you, Chris. Good night. Neighbor, how you do?
Not bad, not bad.
Yeah, Darren was making a point. Go ahead, Darren.
Yes. The Abraham family on Hatfield Street, the PS, Chelly Jagan kicked him out of the party because Chelly Jagan felt that he was a traitor and he was giving information to then to the party. I think it was United Force with Peter Degar and so forth. And after he was kicked out from being the PS for the premiere, at night or a few nights after, they went and threw a bomb at his home, and they killed all of his children and himself. I believe only his wife had survived. And there was like 7 children who died, young children who died. So the PPP has always been a vindictive party. It has always been a party of evildoers. You know, so last evening when SHEROT, after SHEROT program, I made that post. SHEROT himself called me last night after his program and so forth, and we had a talk. And today, you know, when the police was at the room this morning, he called me and said, you know, the police at my home and so forth. So then we started to, you know, to mobilizing persons and so forth, you know. So we could have preempted them from 1964. They were been doing wickedness, you know.
Before I bring in Chris, Darren, that is true. And let me tell you this. My grandfather, Ivan Remington, who's from Craig, on the east bank of Demerara, was a PPP member of parliament. And I think in 1980 or 1979 or something like that, he broke away from the PPP and he joined the PNC with Burnham.
Very good.
And he became a regional minister. And the PPP operatives on the East Bank ran his car off the road, beat him, broke both his hands and his legs. And it is the PNC government that had to send him to the United States for treatment. So I know personally what you're talking about, and it is true. We don't have to go back to 1979 and 1964. Just let's look at the last government of the PPP. Where under that government, hundreds of young black men were murdered by PPP death squads. And the PPP government on the Barjack Day was sanctioned by the United States. The United Nations sent Gay McDougall, who was the rapporteur for minority rights, to investigate the deaths. And she reported that the PPP government was complicit with the deaths. They attacked her. They attacked her. Barnes Amos, when she was the leader of the House of Lords, expressed concern. They tried to sabotage different programs that her department, no, I think she was Secretary of Overseas Development then. They tried to sabotage programs that she was doing to mobilize financial resources for Guyana so that those programs would not be successful. So now we see members of parliament, members of Congress here in the United States condemning their racism. And you had the PPP, through their supporters in Queens, mounting a racist campaign against 2 members of Congress. But little did they know, we have over 30 members of Congress who are supporting us and who are aware of what they're doing. But you see, they feel empowered because they have oil money. And they think they could hire these high-priced Republican lobbyists to lobby the Biden administration and lobby Congress members, Republican members of Congress. And they were bold enough to support the Trump racist agenda openly, called on their supporters to vote for Donald Trump, condemn Black Lives Matter. Members of the PPP, including Prior Manichan, went and posted Trump racist slogans without probably realizing what it meant, saying that no, Black lives don't matter, all lives matter. When we know that it's because all lives don't matter. That's why we had to create the term Black Lives Matter too.
And it doesn't, and saying Black Lives Matter, it doesn't mean that other races' life doesn't matter.
No, we're emphasizing the fact that Black Lives Matter.
Because of what the suffering, the victimizations, and so forth that the African people go through in the entire world.
Yeah, let Chris jump in here. Chris, what is your reaction to the arrest of your colleague member of parliament?
Right, but you know, we've been preaching this ad nauseum. Essentially, this is how the People's Progressive Party Civic, for all the years that I've been involved in the hustings of this country, this is how the People's Progressive Party Civic knows to govern, only through fear, intimidation, and threats. And you would have seen during their 23 years in government, when you criticize them, what happens to you. I can recall working as a public relations officer for then leader of the opposition, Robert Corbyn, where you had businessmen from Regent Street, some from Robb Street, that the only time that they feel secure to speak with him is about 2 a.m. in the morning when they will literally sneak into Congress Place and have these conversations with Mr. Corbyn in terms of what is happening, the threats and intimidation that are meted out to them by the People's Progressive Party Civic. And what in times when the PPP realized that a particular businessman or a group of businessmen would have been speaking out against them, they weaponized at that time the Guyana Revenue Authority. And they would send the GRA after these businessmen, turn up at their business places one day and tell them that they owe millions of dollars in taxes, which they can't show any record for, but tell them that they owe. And unless they pay, their business are going to be scrapped. You've had a lot of businesses that went under because of these threats and intimidation by the People's Progressive Party Civic. I can tell you of some businessmen who literally went to the U.S. Embassy, got visas for their family, sold their businesses, sold out everything, and they migrated because of the situation that they were made to live under during the People's Progressive Party Civic. I remind your viewers about Mark Benchcup, for example, just for being part of a protest demonstration, standing outside of the office of the president with a loud hailer. And Mark Benchcup was charged on a trumped-up treason charge, spent years in prison, which had an effect on his family. And that has been the pattern of the People's Progressive Party Civic. They can't rule and govern in fairness. They have to rule and govern by intimidation and fear in the society. And of course, it juxtapose the 23 years of the PPP. So now, coming into office, be it installed in 2020, and you see the same fear and intimidation restarted. They've then weaponized the Guyana police force. I unfortunately happened to be the first victim back in 2020 when the party of 45 police men, 14 police mobile unit, the streets were cordoned off. The area, my immediate area, was plunged into blackout. Darren Wade, James Bond, Valda Lawrence, and the list goes on of people who were outside of my home. And Darren created history in which you had a magistrate conducted court virtually right there and then in the street.
Chris, let me interrupt you there.
A judge.
Correct.
A judge.
Of the High Court.
Right, convene court right there and then. An injunction was granted restricting the Guyana police force from entering and or removing any item from my property. Darren Wade, as the attorney at law, served that on the senior police who was present there and then. He read out the entire statement to the police. And what did they do? He simply just threw it on the ground and they stomped on it, disregarded the injunction filed by a judge, and proceeded to barge in my home and remove and the broke windows in order to get into the house, all of that. And then it continued with Valda Lawrence, Carol Joseph, James Bond, the staff members from the Guyana Elections Commission. Recently, you saw former Minister of Finance, Winston Jordan. Today, it was SHEROT DUNCAN. And the list goes on. And this is how the People's Progressive Party Civic knows to govern, through fear and intimidation. It's the only way they know how to govern.
Thank you, Chris. Joining us is a veteran journalist, broadcaster, Enrico Woolford, who's the editor of Capital News. Mr. Woolford, are you hearing me now?
I am hearing you, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. What's your reaction to the rest of SHEROT DUNCAN?
Well, it's unfortunate that this continues to happen in Guyana. In terms of everybody knows Article 146 of the Constitution in terms of freedom of expression. And what has happened is that we in Guyana seem to conflate things that should not be conflated. And what we tend to do is to use various parts of the law to when we don't like somebody. And when we do like them, it doesn't really matter. I heard she's a member of parliament, but she's also an attorney at law, Amanda Walton, on Trinidad radio. And she was also pointing out the same thing. You cannot be selective in how you are dealing with certain issues. And as a journalist, I have always been concerned that we tend to treat with our freedom of expression, Article 146, very, very lightly, very, very flippantly. And even if others who want to come on the air and or on social media want to talk about anything, they have that right to do so. Of course, there are limitations in 146, but those limitations do not amount to what is clearly a case of name calling, as against having to find proof to deal with a particular issue if an accusation is made. And of course, there are civil remedies to these issues with regard to the libel and slander laws in the country. So it really should be a civil matter and not the kind of matter that is arisen in this case.
Thank you, Enrico. And joining us is host of Straight Up with Mark Benchcop, Mark Benchcop himself. Mark, good night. Welcome for the first time on the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rickford, and thank you for inviting me. Good to see the other gentlemen, Darren Wade, attorney at law, and the Honorable MP, and also the Honorable veteran journalist, Enrico Woolford. Good to see you, gentlemen.
Mark, all of the talk show hosts who are African Guyanese, particularly male, that have been speaking out on PPP government have been arrested or have wanted bulletins issued for them. You served 5 years in jail for speaking out against Barrett Jagdeo. But everyone in Guyana, all of the male talk show hosts in Guyana have been arrested so far. Gavin Matthews, Kadiki Amsterdam, now SHEROT DUNCAN. What's your reaction to the bold, very bold arrest of a member of parliament?
Well, this is not the first time. It's certainly not the last time. Not so long ago, Member of Parliament Annette Ferguson was actually invited, and they usually use that term, invited to CID. We saw what happened with the Chief Whip, Member of Parliament Christopher Jones. And so it's not the first, and I'm almost certain that it's not the last, that these things will happen, unless a message is sent. The proper message is sent, where citizens, and even not just supporters of the coalition, but citizens in general, will be able to stand up sometime very, very soon and say enough is enough.
Darren, let's look. I'm looking at the police statement. And the police statement says a cyber crime offense. A cyber crime offense. And they list the offense that on the 11th of January, SHEROT DUNCAN, a member of parliament and host of a program under the name In the Ring, made derogatory statements in which he called the name of this gentleman, Anel Giddings, and it says he referred to him as a jagabat and a trench corporal and other disrespectful names, which caused him significant emotional distress and humiliation. Could you point me to anywhere in the laws of Guyana, Darren, where you're humiliating someone, causing them emotional distress, making disrespectful comments against them, and making derogatory statements against them is a crime?
Under the said cybercrime legislation, if you would have, or if you have used certain terms, or you insult someone's integrity, or you're using that are libelous also, you can be held, quite frankly, liable under the cybercrime legislation. But I do not believe that the cybercrime legislation envisages these types of matter. I believe it has been abused. There is an offense, a summary offense of breach of the peace, for calling someone a name that is not theirs. And with those type of matters, the police generally invites you to the police station, and you're there with a complainant, and you could and the police generally invites you to apologize or so forth to that person. I believe the cybercrime legislation is being abused here. I think the harassment here is more or less if you put somebody naked picture or something, you know, those kind of things that you need to go to jail for. Because if you put my body up there, you will humiliate me. So it's that type of humiliation the cybercrime legislation envisages. Remember the young lady from Babis who came now and was at the city hotel, and someone came in and the other settlement, they video her in sexual intercourse, and then the person were charged and placed before the court, and they were sentenced to prison. Things like that is what the cybercrime legislation about. You're bullying someone, you know, you're defaming them and so forth. But in these circumstances, a name calling, come on, there is a summary offense for calling someone that a name that is not theirs. I can't recall the fine, but I don't even know, probably reach $1,000, if at all, if it's so much, because it's a very old piece of legislation. So I believe that may have been the way to go, if at all these allegations are true, that they have been called a name much to his annoyance. You know, you call him from trench crappo and jagabat. And what is a jagabat? What is a trench crappo? How is it defamatory? How is it derogatory? You know? What meaning to those words?
Darren, before I move to the others, I want to ask you another question as the attorney here. Now, members of the PPP have called Amanza, Bar Jaber went on critics and called Amanza lowlife. He called me a lowlife. He said Congressman Hakeem Jeffries is a racist. Yvette Clark is a racist. He also made other derogatory remarks about me. I collect money from people and that's how I live and my organization, whatever. Now, why aren't those people arrested? There's a comment right now on Orphan Alley's page calling for my head to be cut off and brought to Guyana platter for a reward of $1 million. On the Guyana Police Force website, Facebook page, there's someone saying, bring me to Guyana dead or alive. The FBI officer, one of the agents who came to me in this investigation that is going on currently about this wanted bulletin, asked me how come a police force is harboring terroristic threats. I couldn't answer that question. Now, Paul Slow, a few months ago, made a report under the Cybercrime Act against Anil Nanlal for calling him derogatory names. And there's no investigation that we know of. Nobody was arrested. Could you comment on the role the Guyana Police Force is playing as being the personal police force of members of the PPP?
Well, I believe, quite frankly, the Guyana Police Force is biased in the way how they're operating. They're not operating as a professional police force, which is a professional police organization, which is imperative in any democracy to ensure law and order. That being said, there is the law, there's case law that say that whereby the Commissioner of Police can be forced to investigate, and based upon the findings of those investigations, charges could be laid. The DPP also have a constitutional role, and it's not unfettered. So there is redress for persons who believe that there's redress for Amanza as well. I noticed she made a complaint today. There's redress for her. However, you maybe have to go to court and embarrass them. You have to go to court and embarrass them and sue them. So there is redress for persons who believe that the reports, or rather the reports, are not being treated fairly, or the investigation. So any virtual complainant who has suffered any sort of victimization or vindictiveness, or who's being treated unfairly by the Guyana Police Force, can approach the court and force them to act by law, or via mandamus.
Chris, you are the politician here. You're the second most senior member of parliament for the opposition. You're the chief whip. So far, 4 of your colleagues have been arrested. Sorry, 3. And now Winston Jordan, but I know you realize that he's not in parliament. You have 8 members of GCOM that have been arrested. You have your brother, James Bond, who was arrested for being the attorney in a lawful transaction that the Chief Justice has now ruled was lawful, and dismissed all of the requests of the PPP and bar them from trying to nullify that transaction. You have the Chief Elections Officer. You have Ms. Myers, whose rights were violated when she was denied medical attention for a long while. She ended up being admitted to hospital. You had the young lady, I think it's Miss Miller from GCOM, who was denied her constitutional rights. She was experiencing her menstrual cycle when she was arrested. She told them, they told her no, she couldn't use sanitary facilities. She must do what she had to do right there, denied her her right to speak to an attorney. And you have what happened to you. You have the arrest of Serona Brooms. All of these people have been Afro-Guyanese, all of them. And it is the Guyana police force that has been acting as a vendetta squad for the PPP. As a member of parliament, how can this affect democracy in the country and race relations?
Well, I wouldn't say how can it. I would want to say has it, and it has affected race relation and democracy in Guyana. As I mentioned before, the People's Progressive Party Civic, the only way in which they know how to govern is through fear and intimidation. When the People's Progressive Party Civic was installed in 2020, very shortly thereafter, with the arrests and what happened at my house, we observed that the People's Progressive Party Civic are falling back to that party that we know them to be. We started referring to them, or referring to it, as a creeping dictatorship. But a few months, very short few months after that, when you notice the amount of public servants, predominantly those of African descent, that has been terminated from their places of employment, and you see the continuous pattern by the PPP weaponizing the Guyana police force to conduct their affairs, with the arrest of various former parliamentarians. You had, as you mentioned, those names from the Guyana Elections Commissions and so forth. So in terms of race relation, because all of the persons who have been arrested for under some trumped-up charges, every single one of them happens to be Guyanese of African descent. And yourself, Mark, we have been listening on our program for months, and we've continued to give people the amount of persons who have been terminated from the public service. It started with 200 and it just continued to rise. That number currently stands at 2,327 persons, public servants, who have been terminated. 92% of which happens to be Guyanese of African descent. So in terms of race relation, it has already affected that in the country. In terms of democracy, you can't say that we are truly living in a democratic society, because you see plainly that the voices of people are being suppressed, even in the National Assembly. I told people that what you see, what I would consider the culmination of what transpired in the Assembly on the 29th of December, is as a direct result of the Speaker of the National Assembly, who considers himself a gatekeeper for the People's Progressive Party Civic, and has been trying to stifle the voice of the opposition in the National Assembly as it relates to motions, petitions, bills being brought to the National Assembly, questions being brought to the National Assembly. I remind your viewers that in 2021, after the passage of the national budget, the People's Progressive Party Civic essentially disappeared with the people's money, and it took them 96 days before you had another sitting of the National Assembly. And during that time, you had a total of 486 questions that have been submitted by the opposition. And those questions spoke to education, because thousands of students are out of school because of the pandemic. It spoke to the health sector because of the rising number of COVID-19 and the death tolls. We took 96 days before the National Assembly of Guyana met again to answer that 486 questions. And when we had that opportunity, it was only then, because we had the opportunity to ask those questions, that we learned that those vaccines, the Sputnik V vaccine that we were told by the People's Progressive Party Civic, came from Russia. It was only then we learned that it came from a middleman who was a sheik, and some shady transaction between them. And despite us saying to the government that these vaccines are not WHO approved, they still went and administered those vaccines into the arms of thousands of Guyanese, who now, as a result of that, cannot travel to places such as Canada, the United States, parts of the Caribbean, and the list goes on. So again, to reaffirm the question that you asked, the People's Progressive Party Civic and their action and the weaponizing of the Guyana police force, it has hampered race relations in Guyana in terms of democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, even freedom of assembly. because myself and Annette Ferguson currently we are before the courts for trumped up charges of illegal procession. Myself and Annette Ferguson walking on Regent Street on the pavement apparently constitute a breach of the law that is called illegal procession, and we're before the courts. So there isn't that freedom of expression and freedom of movement of people in Guyana. So therefore, democracy is under threat on a daily basis in the country, and race relation has been hampered as a result.
Enrico, thank you, Chris. Enrico, Nigel Damlal, the Minister of Local Government, recently said that the Chancellor and Court of Appeal Justice Don Gregory should be fired for ruling against the government. Several ministers of the government came to his defense and said that's freedom of speech, including Prem Anachan, who's an attorney. Also, we have a situation where members of the media, your media fraternity, we believe, a lot of us believe, are suppressing news like this. It's not getting out, they don't report on it. Opposition leader make a statement complaining about something, they don't report on it. It's not carried. If SHEROT DUNCAN is now arrested today, that kind of information is not reported because we call it the ethnic media. I don't want to put you on the line, I'm saying that because most of them are East Indian supporters of the PPP. How can we promote democracy in Guyana when the press itself is undermining democracy and free speech and being openly biased and racist?
Well, Rickford, that is an opinion that you've expressed, but if the question is that how can the press be more open and balanced and fair and objective, I think one has to go back to training and education and the fact that in Guyana, we, as my mother used to say, like to talk for one for Paris, two for night. We tend to change our position based on, whom we're talking to, who we support, who we like, rather than what is the issue at hand. And I think we have, therefore, to deal with the issues at hand. And we cannot be selective. I'm glad that Mark joined the conversation because I recall that there's this archaic law, there's this law that doesn't allow you to put people at the back of a pickup or in the tray of a truck without permission and what have you. And I think I recall, and Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, that he had a difficulty with the police because of that particular issue.
I remember that.
Because people were being transported to do a picketing exercise, to seek redress in the society. That is a democratic right. That is how a society functions. When you have an issue, you seek redress. Right now, the private sector, some members of the private sector are up in arms over the CARICOM private sector organization seeking to seek redress on the local content bill. We cannot just be selective. And journalists have to understand that they've got to report all the news, as the New York Times likes to say, all the news that's fit to print. And the emphasis is not always on the fit or the print, but what we know to be the truth. We cannot decide we don't like this person, therefore we are not going to report on it. It is a pity, and it takes journalism back a whole lot. But what has happened is, Rickford and viewers, is that we have emerged into a social media environment where anyone can go on TikTok, anyone can go on Instagram, anyone can go on Facebook, providing you understand how to use the platforms and use those platforms. And Facebook, for example, has community standards There was clearly a Guyanese was killed. Persons were using various remarks and videos to express themselves. Some of those videos are patently wrong, in bad taste and what have you. Yet Facebook didn't remove them because, as far as Facebook was concerned, persons have a right to say what they want to say within the confines of the standards that they have set up. So journalists, therefore, the traditional journalists, have to deal with that and what is also happening on the other platforms. But I'm also glad that the Honorable Christopher Jones, Member of Parliament, is here, because I think we forget that when we go to an election, we elect first, and as Guyanese like to say, first and foremost, legislators. They make the laws. That is why we elect them, among other things. They have to make the laws, and if they find that they've made a law that is coming into certain difficulties and what have you, it is also their responsibility to change the law. So if Section 19 from 1 to 6 or in the cybercrime bill is posing some problems, particularly 6 is posing some problems, and Attorney Darren Wade alluded to it with regard to substantial emotional distress. Let me quote it directly. If that is causing a problem, then it makes, you don't even have to beg the MPs. The MPs have to understand that that has to be changed, because it is creating a challenge with regard to how persons are using it, and whether they are embarrassed, whether things can cause embarrassment or what have you. I think it's not 6, it's 3. A person subjects another person to public ridicule, contempt, hatred, or embarrassment. So one has to look and see whether, as legislators, the legislators have also made errors and made mistakes in the law, or whether the law is also being applied by other legislators in a way that it wasn't intended. And if you look at some of the comments on social media, you look at and you listen to some of the comments on the street, that's something that people have been talking about. And that is, while the cybercrime bill was assented to and brought in within the last 5 years or so, the intent was not what it is being used for. In the same way that you cannot decide, well, I'm going to cherry pick a law here and there. And therefore one has to decide that, look, this is creating a problem. The challenge you have is whether the people who want to use it against you, weaponize it, will agree. But the good thing about a democratic system is that people get voted in and people get voted out. So you don't know how long you're going to last in there. So you have to therefore make sure that everyone can be treated fairly under the law. And that, I think, is also important. So I think now that this has been weaponized, one has to start rethinking.
Yeah. Mark, you bore the blunt of PPP dictatorship. Recently, both President Biden and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken warned countries not to use cybercrime legislation to stifle dissent. Enrico just basically outlined what has been happening. The government is abusing the law even though a lot of us condemned this law when it's passed, because we knew what will happen. I republished an article I wrote about this law when it was first proposed as a bill in the legislation. Mark, isn't that the role, though, of the technical people like the police force and the judiciary to make sure that laws aren't abused and that there's strict application to the law? And in terms of the judiciary, make sure that when they interpret the law, that the intent of the legislation is not abused. And we have that exact situation here. So we have a police force that is assisting the government in using the cybercrime legislation to stifle dissent without any form of limitation. They're just blanket encouraging the government or allowing abuse of the police force to occur. And how can that be allowed to happen in a so-called democratic society?
Let me, Enrico reminded me and of course the viewers about an incident over 12 years ago. There's a truck driver by the name of Maniram back in 2010 who assisted some school children. I think they were high school children. They were protesting the murder of their fellow student, a young man by the name of Kelvin Fraser, I believe.
Region 3.
Yep, who was shot and killed by a member of the Guyana police force. Those students were protesting. They were to protest. Of course, it was running late. Maniram helped to transport those students. In fact, to protest in front of police, Brigham police station. The police arrested Mr. Maniram, charged him, and impounded his vehicle for probably over a week and placed him on $10,000 bail. And so that's the nature of the beast that we're dealing with. Thanks for that reminder, Mr. Enrico Woolford. The other thing Enrico said is that no law should be abused by any government. I agree with that 100%. And dictatorships usually do abuse the laws. They find ways to abuse the laws. But one of the things that our legislatures need to do is that when they are passing laws, they must ensure that there is a least amount of ambiguity. In the case of the cybercrime law, the bill, people were shouting out, supporters of the regime were on top of the mountain, myself included. We were shouting out to the then government that portion of the bill that says one does not have a right, if I'm reading it correctly, one does not have a right to criticize a government is bad. It is bad in law. It is bad in taste. It is nothing that should be acceptable in these modern times. Nobody then was actually listening. And I'm surprised that Mr. Ramjatan, who was then the Minister of we know it then to be Home Affairs, Public Security, said that what the PPP is doing is abusing that portion of the bill now. Of course, they're abusing it because it should have never been there in the first place. When dictatorship like a PPP regime is installed, that is exactly what they are going to do. Abuse the law or the laws to their advantage. Enrico also mentioned something to the effect that
they want a resumption.
Could you guys mute your microphones if you're not speaking? Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, sorry about that. Somebody's saying that there's no sound. Do we still have sound? Are folks hearing?
Yes. Viewers, can you text us? Let us know. Message me. Let me know if you're hearing. Mark, what has happened is that I'm seeing here that obviously it's the trans.
Okay, so are we back? Are you guys? They said they weren't hearing.
Yes, they're saying they're hearing. Mark, what is happening though is that, as usual, the PPP have an operation going. I'm getting a message from Facebook saying that this broadcast is promoting violence. So that's what has been reported, because obviously they don't want, we have so far about 12,000 people watching live. So they don't want to have this broadcast. So they're trying to send all these complaints to Facebook to get them to block it, but proceed.
Okay, so let me see, I'm noticing here because I have it shared on my platform as well. Are folks hearing me? because some folks are saying that there is no audio on my end.
Oh, on your
Okay.
page? I don't know. I'm getting feedback here that they're hearing us loud and clear. Hearing all panelists loud and clear.
Somebody's saying that they're not hearing no audio from me.
Guys, text me. Let me know if you're hearing Mark Benchcop.
All right.
Those are two on. Yes, they said they're hearing you, Mark.
Okay, this is on another platform, my platform, that they're saying that they're not hearing. So we'll get back. Sorry about that.
We're hearing Mark loud and clear. Several persons are saying that.
Yeah.
Mark, while you started out, let me come back to you. You want to take some time to sort it out, or you want to continue?
All right. So let's hear. I hope they're hearing me now, loud and clear. Sorry about that, gentlemen. I don't know what part they missed, but I was actually agreeing with Enrico that back in 2010, the truck driver was a guy by the name of Money Ram who was transporting some folks to go and protest, and the PPP actually they caused that guy to be arrested, and they charged him and subsequently placed him on $20,000 bail. But back to this cybercrime bill, it should have never been that portion of the bill where persons, if they criticize a government or they say something about a government, that they have to be pulled in for question. Dictatorships such as the PPP regime, they will abuse that. And there's nothing that can be done about it at this moment, because all of the persons that they're targeting are persons who are purportedly supporters of the coalition. And so there's nothing that can happen because in Parliament, the opposition is just the minority. They have a 1-seat or a 2-seat majority. So we'll just have to hear this bill just go out. That's it. Again, folks are saying that they're not hearing me, so I don't know what's going on.
I just saw a message. I'm hearing Mark Benchcop loud and clear. Yeah, so I guess it's your on your platform, Mark.
Yeah.
While Mark started out, Darren, I want to come back to you. Tell our viewers what are the mechanisms in the law to have someone charged criminally, privately, not through the Guyana police force. For instance, if somebody has been wronged and they made a complaint to the Guyana police force, like in the case of Paulslow, no action has been taken, what can they do to bring the matter before a criminal court, a magistrate court? Darren, can you hear me?
Right, Rickford, your audio just went down a bit.
My audio?
Yes. Well, yes. While you were speaking, your audio is low now.
Okay. Let me see if I can rectify that.
Yeah,
I'm good now. Darren, can you hear me? I think Darren is frozen. Darren,
yes,
can you hear me? Oh, did you hear the question?
Can you hear me? Yes, I'm hearing you. Can you hear me?
I'm hearing you.
I didn't hear the question.
The question is.
Okay.
The question is.
Question? Because you are dropped.
Right. People are making complaints to the police force, and if it's against members of the government, nothing is being done. For instance, Paulslow filed a complaint against Anil Nandlal under the same Cybercrime Act. Nothing is being done. I'm saying, can you tell the people, the viewers, under the laws of Guyana, what can they do in those circumstances where they've been wronged and want to get their matter before a magistrate? What can they do to bring criminal charges against the accused?
My understanding of the law is that anyone could file a criminal charge. But it's advised an attorney at law to file a private charge, because the law is that you should not be shut out from the courts. You must have some sort of redress. So, because if it's, for instance, the same, and it's there to protect persons who are not getting redress from the DPP office and so forth and from the police. So it's always an option that one could approach the court and institute a private criminal matter. One will have to file the various charge sheets and so on, what we call the case docket or jackets, with the court, setting out what is the charge, what are the allegations. Once sufficient details are there, so the person who is answering the charge will know what they need to answer to.
Okay. Enrico, let me come back to you. Many of us have been clamoring about the international members of the international community's silence. You stood up at GCOM, you interviewed during the raucous that the PP members, including Baron Jagde and Arfidali and all the senior leaders of the PP created. And you spoke to Jagdeo himself, you spoke to the Carter Center, Jason Carter, you had the American ambassador, Canadian ambassador, the British ambassador speaking out, the European Union ambassador who even demanded to see statements of Paul. They were very vocal then. What do you make of their silence now?
I want to say, Rickford, that as the late Professor Ali Mazrui said, we have very short memories of hate. And in terms of history, so often people who agreed with something, 10 years ago, depending on their interests, will not agree with it 10 years on. And the same thing happens in terms of 5 months, in terms of eight months. One of our challenges is that we seem not to recognize that the so-called international community is representing countries' interests. They are interested in what they are interested in. They are really not, with all due respect to my friends in the diplomatic community and so on, they're not really interested in us. When they talk about whatever they talk about, it is their interests they're talking about. Countries have national interests. The United States, for example, has arrogated onto itself some international and the EU and so on. They believe that they can police and ensure that the international law and order, those things are maintained around the world. But it is for their own interests that they are doing that, not because they believe specifically in assisting Vanuatu or the Solomon Islands or Grenada or Peru or anything like that. The whole idea of fixing the fire at your neighbor is so that you don't burn down, and that is what they're about. So, although you can appeal to them, you have to be cognizant that whatever you do, you have to do it from their point of view, that what they would not like to see in their societies and their countries. Martin Luther King, for example, appealed to the conscience of the United States people. How could you say that you're Christian? How could you say you believe in these things? How could you say you believe in the Constitution and we the people and so on when you separate people, when you make certain statements about people, when you make certain laws about them? They can't vote, they can't do this, they can't do that, they have to use separate facilities and what have you. That's what you can do with the international community, and that's what I encourage people to do with the international community. Appeal to them and say, look, this you would not like to happen in your own society, so why are you allowing it to happen in other societies? And even if you try to isolate yourself, eventually it will come to you. And I don't want to say that situation happened on January 6th in the United States last year, but it came very close to that. And therefore one has to be concerned about it. But there's something else that I want to mention with regard to what Darren, the attorney Darren Wade, pointed out, that yes, persons can seek civil action and seek private action and what have you. But something we have not really realized is that, with all due respect to the attorneys, I was reading a case recently where a woman went to court in the United States against the healthcare providers and what have you. She won $6,000 US. The attorney fees, $49,000 US. So, and the court awarded fees to the attorney. Yeah? So when these things happen, it might be a way, without being being flippant or facetious, it might be a way of ensuring that some of the persons who need to represent these issues will be paid. And therefore we have to seek to ensure that that doesn't happen, you know, and therefore our legislators like Chris, the Honorable Chris Jones, the chief whip of the opposition, they have to also pay attention to see whether we are paying more money to attorneys to fight cases that essentially should not be there to begin with, to fight cases where, if, for example, NCN still owes me money, the attorney fees, I'm sure, will be more than the money that they have to pay me back. That is the kind of thing that we have to be worried about, where our society, and as a member of the Transparency Institute of Guyana, I'm concerned about that too, not just as a journalist, but accountability, transparency, and integrity in public office and in private in the private sector. So we have to look to see whether some of these things that are being done are done in order to feather somebody else's nest. And Mark also mentioned the difficulties with regard to, and people commented on it, and he's quite right, where the cybercrime bill, people pointed out that it can be abused and what have you. Therefore, that's one of the reasons I'm saying to the Honorable Chris Jones that they should seek to amend it if it's causing some problems. But even if you were to amend it, in the same way that they looked for an opaque, a far away law and plucked it out to deal with Mr. Muniram or the person Mark mentioned with regard to the tray of the vehicle. Persons could then go and cherry pick and decide that, oh, well, we can't charge you under the cybercrime bill, so we are going to charge you under some other vague or far away law that might still be on the books. So the issue here is 146, as far as I'm concerned, of the Constitution, freedom of expression, and SHEROT, whether he's a member of Parliament or he's not, or he's just a politician, should have that freedom of expression. Sharma, if you recall, the elder Sharma, had that freedom of expression, and he was not a member of Parliament at the time. He was not a member of Parliament, and they faced certain harassment with regard to his license, with regard to even the lights. I remember being there where GPL came and
disconnected
his electricity when he didn't owe GPL for anything and so on. And when you use the state organs as weapons, then we are sliding down a slippery slope toward what you guys have been mentioning. But I wouldn't go so far. I'm trying to be as objective as possible on this program. But one does not want to slide into that kind of situation in the country. And therefore, one has to always be on guard. One has to look and ensure that if somebody says it's raining and the other person says it isn't, you have to look outside and see if it is indeed raining, as the common saying goes. So it is a concern to me as a journalist, and it is a concern to me as somebody who helped to start the transparency chapter in Guyana. And if you guys will recall that when we started the transparency chapter, the now speaker of the National Assembly wrote to Transparency International and called us all sorts of names, including some very derogatory statements. And he could sue me if he wants. Some derogatory statements of a particular couple, and it was disgusting, to say the least. That was part of that group, and we can say, oh, that's part of the course in terms of politics and what have you. But it's something that we should not encourage. Where at one time it's good and the other time it's bad. You know, we approbate and reprobate at the same time, and that is my concern.
Mark, as we wrap up, I want you to follow up on what Enrico was saying in terms of, but isn't that his last point there with Mansour-Nadir's comments or his correspondence? But isn't that what they're doing? Aren't they promoting two countries where one set of people can talk and have the freedom of speech, but the others can't? So long as you don't support them, you don't have freedom of speech, because they'll use the arms of the state to crush you. Isn't that promoting some sort of supremacy?
Of course it is, and no right-thinking person, whether Guyanese or non-Guyanese, would take somebody like Mansour-Nadir seriously at all. Especially sitting there, and I can just I can sympathize with folks like the Member of Parliament, Chief Whip Christopher Jones, and his colleagues sitting there and have to endure that sort of pressure, that sort of emotional distress whenever Mansour-Nadir speaks. He's an on-air Speaker of the National Assembly, but that is what they're creating. They're saying that it is okay for one set, as long as that set support them, it is okay for them to say anything. But the other set who do not support them, they're going to go after them. They're going to find ways and means to go after them. They're going to either stifle their media entities from getting any state ads. They are going to persecute other individuals, charging them, and all these manner of things. They have been doing just that. And it's unfortunate. Like I've said in the beginning, it's got to stop. We've got to find a way to stop it. Enrico mentioned earlier, I hope, and I think we are having some problems again with the sound. And so are we? We're
I'm
back?
hearing you.
Yeah, thanks. And so we're sorry for the distraction. Yep. So what we're having basically two sets of laws. Let me just quickly, just 1 second. Yep. 1 second, please. Sorry about that, guys. Enrico, sorry, man. Old age catching up on me.
Go right ahead.
But let me say that.
Mark, you're just a little vain. You're looking at yourself.
Thank you. So nobody takes Mansour-Nadir seriously. No one. He is, in my opinion, a horrible and unfair Speaker of the National Assembly.
And
so
unfit.
I don't know how Chris and others, sit there and listen to that guy. I rather look at the mace. I rather sit and listen to the mace, talk to the mace, than to listen to somebody like Mansour-Nadir. I hope I didn't misinterpret what Mr. Woolford said. that, and do correct me, Enrico, that because someone is an MP means then that they have more right to speak out more than an ordinary citizen. I think all citizens should have equal right.
No, I don't think that's what he said, but he's going to respond.
Yeah,
No, that's
exactly.
what I said.
Well, good. That's why I'm saying I hope I didn't hear that. I was a bit distracted. So forgive me. Please don't suffer any sort of infliction of emotional distress or whatever. Please forgive me, Enrico, for that. But, in closing, it is a dangerous, dangerous path that we're in right now, Guyana, where individuals are being attacked, whether they're politicians, members of parliament, whether they're GCOM workers. We just saw an individual, a young man, Hetzberger, I believe, was fired for suspicion, acts of suspicion. There was no charge, there was no conviction, there was no evidence to substantiate, but they just fired him, just like that. 2,000 plus persons have been fired from their jobs. Other folks are being persecuted and all these manner of things. And I don't know what is happening in Guyana, but I'll tell you guys this. People need to stand up for their rights. They shouldn't sit and wait for ABC countries' representatives to say something, because quite often those people, the pains that citizens are enduring daily are not necessarily the pains of maybe the US ambassador, the Canadian ambassador. They don't give a damn. They're basically there to protect their country's interest in terms of business. That is what it's about. And so we shouldn't be sitting and expect members or representatives from the ABC countries to say anything about the plight of the ordinary citizens in that country. People need to exercise their constitutional rights, of course, in a lawful manner, to stand up and protest and defend democracy that is dying daily under the installed PPP regime.
Thanks, Marcus. Your closing comments?
Well, I share similar sentiments of Mark and Enrico on this subject matter. I mean, unlike Enrico, who a veteran journalist and diplomat of some sort, I as a politician, I would put it bluntly that we are indeed in a dictatorship. This modus operandi of the People's Progressive Party Civic is exactly what you see in dictatorships across the world. And this is exactly what the United States Secretary have spoken about just recently. And we see it every single day. The Guyana police force under the People's Progressive Party Civic has been weaponized. We have seen the blatant attempt to silence the voices of the opposition. We've seen the Guyana police force being used, and they arrested a number of people, all of which happens to be Guyanese of African descent. We spoke about those persons in the public service who have been fired, over 2,000 of them, 89% of which happens to be Guyanese of African descent. So we have slipped in 1.5 years. Guyana has slipped back into a dictatorship that we managed to get ourselves out of after 23 years. And you note, once the People's Progressive Party Civic remains in office for a prolonged period of time, they up the ante, so to speak. It starts now with these trumped up charges being meted out to opposition members. And the numbers are large. But back in the 23 years under their administration, after they weren't successful in silencing the voices of the opposition, they took that up a notch. And that's when you see the emergence of the Phantom Death Squad, in which Enrico was one of those journalists who have been covering that entire episode, what we call the period of the Troubles, in which you had a former minister, Leslie Ramsamy, who used his government letterhead to purchase a sophisticated spy equipment that was only intercepted there at Pleasance when the police had a roadblock and they got that piece of device and so forth. You know about the association with the Raja Shahid Khan. Every single day in this country, under the People's Progressive Party Civic 23-year rule, every single day you wake up and you read breaking news, murder in some part of the country every single day. You had no less than a sitting minister of the People's Progressive Party Civic government Satlio saw who him and his sibling and the security guard were slaughtered in their homes. And to this date, under the People's Progressive Party Civic, while they were in government, they didn't even launch an investigation to ascertain who killed their own colleague. That tells you the level in which the People's Progressive Party is prepared to take the country, because they took this country there under their 23 years reign in office. And we have already seen that they have started in that same trajectory, getting back where we were. It is just soon before you see political opponents probably drive-by shootings and whatever at their house. I mean, I can't give certain information in terms of the security mechanism I've put in place as it relates to my family and my home, because knowing that I'm dealing with the People's Progressive Party Civic, I expect anything from them. You heard Darren Wade spoke last night when he put up on his Facebook page, we must pray for SHEROT Duncan, because after SHEROT revealed what he did last night in the Ring program, we were actually worried about SHEROT's safety. And lo and behold, less than 12 hours after, the police, which has been weaponized by the People's Progressive Party Civic, turned up at his home and he's arrested. I take you back to when former Minister of Finance Winston Jordan was on SHEROT's program addressing the matters about two financial papers that the People's Progressive Party Civic brought to the Parliament on the 14th of December 2021. And Mr. Winston Jordan outlined that none of the monies that they're requesting, they could not say that it was unforeseen expenditure, because it was routine expenditure. The next day, we heard Mr. Winston Jordan has been invited to Suku's office and so forth. That is just to give you an illustration of what is happening in this country. We are in a dictatorship. The People's Progressive Party Civic is using the Guyana police force. They have weaponized it. And anytime there is dissent, there is opposition voices against the People's Progressive Party Civic, you expect the police to turn up at your home for some trumped up charges. And
even if you're abroad, Chris, even if you're abroad.
Correct is right. And I'm corrected, even if you are abroad. So it shows you the level that Rickford Burke happens to be in the United States, a citizen there. But who is Rickford Burke there to speak about the PPP? And that tells you the extent in which they are prepared to go, because under their 23 years in office, they've went there. They've been there. The Phantom Death Squad, I spoke about the business community and businessmen who were fearful of speaking out against the PPP because they would have at that time sent the Ghana Revenue Authority to your business place and tell you how much billions of dollars you owe in rates and taxes. I tell you about businessmen who sneaked into Congress Place under the leadership of Robert Corbyn and told him what is transpiring. And shortly thereafter, those men had to put grand sale of their business places on Regent Street and so forth, big sale. And then a week or so after, they pack their bags and they head to the United States and Canada with their family, seeking refuge in those countries. That is what happened under the People's Progressive Party Civic in 23 years. And here again, in 18 or 20 months after being installed, we have seen the country has already started shifting and heading back in that same direction once again. Very unfortunate.
Chris, what you said is so true. And I happen to believe, as so many others, that maybe one day I'll do a program on this, that the PPP is doing all this because whenever they act and they abuse people and they commit atrocities, there has never been any consequence. Even under the Granger administration, there was no consequence. I know you were not on the part of the cabinet, so it would be unfair to ask you why the Granger government did not hold anyone in the PPP accountable for those murders, or even conducted a commission of inquiry. But as a party, I hope that someday the PNC, which was the largest part of the coalition, and Mr. Granger will give an account for why no one was ever held accountable. But I don't think it's fair to ask you that question, Chris. Let me move on to Darren, your wrap-up comments.
Well, thank you, Rickford. I believe we all could agree that the PPP is a political party that governed by fear. They try to clamp down on dissent. They're using the police force and the whole state apparatus and resources to settle political scores. certainly we all could agree on that, and that's what the conversation was based on. But one thing I believe that we missed is the judiciary and the role and the function of the judiciary. The role and function of the judiciary is interpretation and application of the law. And one of the things is that no one has approached the courts today challenging this piece of legislation. So while
it's coming.
So I think it's imperative that at some point in time that we should approach the court for a determination of this matter. Thank you very much, Rickford, and a blessed night to you all. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. And I want to let you know that challenge is coming very soon. Enrico, your closing remarks.
As I said earlier, my concern is Article 146 of the Constitution, that persons have a right to say and express themselves in any democratic system. And they also, on the other aspects of the Constitution, they can seek redress for grievances. And if you have a program that is seeking to seek redress, then it is an anathema for persons to therefore try to stop that program from being aired, or stop persons from saying certain things because they don't like what is being said. Now, any mature democracy will ensure that all voices are heard, and we don't go through the false posturing that yes, we're a democratic system, and as Chris was saying, you're creeping into a dictatorship, or you are a dictatorship. The fact that you vote every 5 years in the way that we vote anyhow in Guyana is not a perfect example of where the country ought to be. And I think we need to
for democracy.
We need to be watchdogs. The press needs to be a watchdog on the democratic system in the country, and organizations, as I said, like Transparency Institute of Guyana, Inc., and other organizations like those who are promoting Article 13 of the Constitution, should be able to point out the deficiencies, whether it's in the oil and gas sector, whether it's in the cybercrime issues, whether it's in GCOM, wherever it may be. We need to point out the deficiencies and how we can fix those things, and how we can make sure that this country grows and develops. And I'm very concerned at times that we take 2 steps forward and 1 step backward over time, and we need to have a vision. We need to decide where we are going and get there as quickly as possible, but also allow dissent, and also allow persons to seek redress, also allow for the diversity, not just in race and class, but the diversity of the society to flourish in a way that everybody benefits. And it's not a good thing that that we've used the cybercrime bill so incorrectly, as far as I'm concerned, over the few years that it has been there. It ought not, as Mark said, it ought not have been there in the incarnation that it is. It is, but sometimes, as Churchill said, when I warned them, they didn't listen to me.
Thank you very much. And I spoke out very forcefully on the cybercrime bill.
Yeah, Burke, let me take this opportunity to acknowledge all of your viewers, all of your listeners, and to even welcome within our midst the Jagabats and the trench crappos. As a businessman, I just want to let your listeners know, Mr. Burke, that very soon there will be T-shirts.
Yes.
Crapo T-shirts, Jagabat hats. Please support the business.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. I think that's appropriate. Thank you guys very much. What an informative program. We have to welcome you guys back have you guys back again. Thank you very much. I know it's late in Guyana, but you guys stayed up to be on the program. So thanks, Darren. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Enrico. And thanks, Mark. And thank you to our viewers. Thank you very much. I look forward to being with you again for another conversation with Rickford Burke on Sunday coming. Thank you guys very much. Have a good night, everybody.
You too.
Good night.
And Mark, I'm still around, you know. We will talk. Good night.